think we'll get going. We've got a great group here. I'm Matt Beam, Chairman and CEO of Hartsook. Welcome to the second annual Hartsook Block Power of Philanthropy Summit. I extend special thanks to the Block School for partnering again this year with Hartsook to host the second annual summit. We are both committed to improving lives by helping donors, volunteers, and nonprofit professionals bring their best to the organizations and missions they support and serve. More personally, as a two-time Block School alumnus, I am extremely proud of our partnership. During last year's summit, I explained what we mean at Hartsook when we talk about the power of philanthropy, which is unleashed when donors, volunteers, and nonprofit professionals work together to achieve goals they cannot on their own. Donors are most fulfilled when their philanthropy enables things that are personally important to them, acts only possible when volunteers and staff are involved. Similarly, volunteers find greatest satisfaction when they use their talent and relationships to advance causes that are important to them and invite others to support them meaningfully. And nonprofit professionals, whether executive directors, fundraisers, or program managers, are optimally engaged when they bring donors and volunteers together to achieve individual goals that rely on the other's involvement. When we unleash the power of philanthropy, the sum is greater than its parts. Hartsook and Block certainly understand the power of philanthropy from their involvement in the fundraising and larger nonprofit communities. We believe our roles include the responsibility to expose donors, volunteers, and nonprofit professionals to the latest research findings to inform, guide, and improve their work. And that's precisely what we'll do today. The Women's Philanthropy Institute at Indiana University's Lilly School of Philanthropy recently released a study on household giving decisions. The research revealed interesting and important trends that Hartsook and Block believe you should know about. We look forward to exploring the research together this morning in three ways. First, you'll hear from a panel of informed and engaged community philanthropists as they reflect on their giving decisions. Next, you'll have the opportunity to discuss in breakout rooms how the research study's findings are playing out in your work. Finally, we're delighted to provide an opportunity for you to learn about the research firsthand from the Women's Philanthropy Institute team that conducted and reported on it. What a great morning we have in store. It's now my pleasure to introduce Block School Dean Brian Kloss, who is doing an outstanding job leading Kansas City's business school and connecting it in important new ways in the community. Brian?
Thank you, Matt. And we at the Block School are delighted to partner with Hartsook with this second annual Power of Philanthropy Summit. This partnership with Hartsook is an example of Block's efforts to engage deeply with community and business organizations. Block has a long-standing commitment to supporting nonprofit organizations through education, research, and consulting services. Our MPA program has a strong focus on nonprofit leadership and has graduated many leading lights in the sector. Our Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership has just celebrated its 30th anniversary of service to the nonprofit sector. Nearly 100,000 individuals over those 30 years have participated in center programs and activities. The center has worked as a consultant for over 1,300 nonprofits during that 30-year period on board development, organizational and planning issues, as well as research initiatives. The Midwest Center also provides extensive educational programming specifically on development. In October, for example, the Midwest Center will be launching a new fundraising leadership series, a program focused on building strategic leadership skills for development professionals. So here at Block, we are excited to partner with Hartsook. We are excited about learning from our panelists today, and we are delighted that you are able to join us for this session. Matt?
Thank you, Brian. Now we are excited to begin our first session, a philanthropy panel on giving decisions. We have three well-known and highly respected couples that have graciously agreed to share their insight, experience, and wisdom with us this morning. We are certain all who are joining us today will grow their understanding of giving decisions through their perspectives. It's my honor to introduce the panelists, Judge John Gray and Valerie Chow, MD. After more than 20 years serving as a circuit judge in the 16th Judicial Circuit of Missouri, John Gray joined the Kansas City office of Shook, Hardy & Bacon as a partner in the General Litigation Division. Judge Gray has served as chair of the Judicial Council of the National Bar Association and is active in the Missouri Bar and the Kansas City Metropolitan and Jackson County Bar Associations. Judge Gray has served as a faculty member for the National Institute for Trial Advocacy and for the Kessler Edison Program in Trial Techniques at Emory University School of Law and the Missouri Judicial College. Judge Gray received his undergraduate degree from Grinnell College and Juris Doctor from the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Law. He is a life member of the University of Missouri Kansas City Alumni Association and the NAACP. Valerie E. Chow, MD, is a retired physician, having practiced for 34 years. She was department head of anesthesiology at the Truman Medical Center Lakewood campus and president of Lakewood Anesthesiology for the last 18 years of her career. She received her AB degree from Vassar College, MD from Kansas University School of Medicine, and did her residency in anesthesiology at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center and Parkland Hospital in Dallas. She completed her fellowship in wellness and integrative medicine at the University of Arizona, Tucson. Dr. Chow now serves on the board of directors of the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art and the KC COVID Task Force. She has served on the board of directors of the Truman Medical Center Foundation, Shawnee Mission Hospital, Kansas City Youth Symphony, Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools Foundation for Excellence, and on the advisory board of the Musical Bridges program at the UMKC Conservatory of Music. John and Valerie have 2 adult sons and 1 grandson. Sandy and Christine Kemper. Sandy Kemper is the founder of C2FO and serves as chairman of the board and CEO. He is also chairman of the board of the Collectors Fund, a private equity fund focused on alternative asset classes. Prior to founding the Collectors Fund and C2FO, Sandy founded Perfect Commerce and served as the company's chairman and chief executive officer from 2000 to 2006. Before then, he served as chairman of the board and CEO of UMB Bank and CEO of UMB Financial, a NASDAQ-traded financial services company with more than $20 billion in assets. Sandy graduated from Northwestern University. He is an active angel and venture investor and serves on the corporate boards of UMB Financial, UMB Bank, NIC, and AXA Art USA. He previously served on the board of CBOE Global Markets and Bats Exchange, 2 of the largest stock exchanges in the world, and currently serves on the boards of 2 nonprofits and scholarship leadership development organizations that he co-founded, the Agriculture Future of America and Young Entrepreneurs Program. Christine Kemper founded Kemper & Company following her early endeavors in government, politics, entertainment, and strategic communications. Her marketing and research consultancy has advised local, national, and global brands since 2002. She is co-founder of the Collectors Fund and the Kansas City Collection, 2 enterprises that invest in art and build markets for artists, as well as YEP, an internship and scholarship organization focused on nurturing entrepreneurship among high school students. She has served in leadership roles for dozens of regional nonprofit organizations, including the Women's Foundation, Women's Employment Network, WIN for KC, the World War I Museum and Memorial, De La Salle Education Center, the Symphony Foundation, and University Academy Charter School. She is currently founder and board chair of Kansas City Girls Preparatory Academy, an all-girls college-bound public charter school in Kansas City, Missouri, that opened in August 2019. Christine and Sandy live on a farm where they raise horses, cows, sheep, goats, chickens, and 4 children, in no particular order. Terry and Peggy Dunn. Terry Dunn joined J.E. Dunn in 1974 as contracts officer and became vice president and treasurer in 1978. He was promoted to senior vice president in 1979, executive vice president in 1980, president in 1986, and served as chief executive officer from 1989 to 2013. During his leadership as president and CEO, he led a team that grew the business from an $80 million regional contractor to a $2.8 billion national contractor. He retired as the president and chief executive officer of J.E. Dunn Construction Group, the holding company for J.E. Dunn Construction Company and other affiliates across the nation. He remains a director of J.E. Dunn Construction Group. Mr. Dunn is very active in civic and community volunteer work. Upon retirement, he formed DD Ranch Leawood for senior executives who have retired from major companies and are staying actively engaged as investors, directors, and entrepreneurs in corporate, civic, and charitable initiatives. Terry earned a Bachelor of Business at Rockhurst University and an MBA at the Block School. Peggy Dunn is a lifelong resident of the greater Kansas City area. She has served as mayor of Leawood, Kansas since 1987. In addition to Peggy's role as mayor, she is currently involved with a number of civic and nonprofit organizations. Some of these include serving on governing boards at the Kauffman Center for the Performing Arts, Union Station, Kansas City, Hall Family Foundation, Rockhurst University, Johnson County Education Research Triangle Authority, and Country Club Bank. She serves as an advisory board member of both the Leawood and the Greater Kansas City Chambers of Commerce. Peggy is a graduate of the University of Missouri, Kansas City. She and Terry have 4 grown children and 14 grandchildren. Before we hear from our panelists, I want to recognize all who worked to make today's summit possible. The Block School team was led by Dean Brian Kloss and supported by Dr. Scott Helm, Director of the Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership, and Mark Culver, Senior Program Coordinator at the Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership. The Block team provided significant contributions, particularly in the technical arena, that made today's Zoom summit possible. The Hartsook team, led by Karen Cox and with strong support from Vice President of Support Services Tammy Weinman and Executive Vice Presidents Janelle Johnson and Ross Pfannenstiel, provided important leadership of the summit structure and program development. Today would not have been possible without each of the Block School and Hartsook team members' important contributions. Now on to our panel discussion. We shared a few questions with our panelists in advance, but we're eager to know what's on your mind. As you think of questions for our panelists, please share them in the Zoom chat for Karen Cox to pose later during the panel. Panelists, I'll ask a question and call on each of you to respond. We would love to hear from both members of each couple as you respond to the questions, but understand if one of you will speak for both of you. The first question I'd like to ask is, how did you learn about giving growing up? And do you recall your first gift given as a couple? John and Valerie, I'll call on you first.
Well, I'll take advantage of the opportunity since I'm unmuted and answer first. First of all, I'm grateful for the opportunity to participate in this discussion. I have to admit that when Matt first reached out to us, somewhat incredulous, and the caption of the talk talked about major gifts. Well, the truth is Valerie and I have never made a major gift. And when I talk about major gift, I'm talking about the things that end up getting people's names on a structure or getting people's names on a program. We've never made a gift like that. But in our life together, philanthropy has been a major part of what we believe that we owe to the community. And so I'm grateful to be a part of this and hope that as we discuss these issues further, that we will begin to share additional insights and additional ways in which to think about being philanthropists. Valerie?
In answer to Matt's question, growing up, it was always instilled in me because we were deeply a part of the church that to whom much is given, much is expected. And so it was always an expectation that you had an obligation is the word that was used to, if you became successful, and success can be defined in many ways, but if you were, that you had an obligation to give back to the community and help those behind you, because we all stood on the shoulders of someone else to get where we were. When I was a child, the story of the widow's mite in the Bible was always repeated over and over, that the whole message in that is it wasn't the amount, because she did not give from abundance, but she gave what she had, and she was blessed as a result of it. So that has always stood with me, and I think John came from similar background. So while we may not give $100,000 gift, if we give a $5,000 or $10,000 gift, for that, we feel like we are doing what we can to help the community. So it was instilled from childhood that you had an obligation to give back.
Thank you, John and Valerie. Sandy and Christine, your thoughts on how you learned about giving growing up and about your first gift as a couple?
Similar to Valerie and the judge, we both grew up in families that always valued philanthropy. I would say my family in philanthropy, in my family, it was a little smaller scale than what Sandy's family has traditionally done. Though even in modest amounts, my family has always made a point of echoing some of what the Grays and Dr. Chow just said, which is that we all have an obligation to help others, and that's just part of being in the community. And it's not just about dollars, it's about volunteer time and really putting yourself out there to help others. So that's the family in which I grew up. The question, do I remember our first gift? I don't remember the first gift we gave as a couple, but I do remember that when we sat down to write our first will together as married people, we contemplated, if we got hit by a bus, what would we have, where would our assets go? This was before children. And it caused us to sit and prioritize the things that matter to us. And I would say that in addition to whatever we've been able to influence through the Family Foundation, our own personal giving has now lined up with what we set as our early priorities. It's evolved over time, but it's been a discussion. And now as we are heading towards 60, I think there's nothing like contemplating death to make you think about what really matters to you and what legacy you want to leave. So I would say our discussions around philanthropy are more frequent now than ever.
That's a good way to lead in. Talk about death and hand it over to your husband. Well done. Yeah, I think was the word that I heard earlier was obligation. And I think that's exactly felt. It was about money, it's time. And the first company I was lucky enough to start, and how I met Christine, was a nonprofit organization working with the Kansas City, Missouri School District called Education Inc. And it was a program to bring a bunch of young, dumb, not terribly busy people together that I knew to help mentor and work with high-risk kids inside the KCMS. And still to this day, the most meaningful, I think, and greatest effort company that we ever did. And Mark Scudder, Christine's brother, was president of that company after I was, and it wasn't about big money. It was about time and commitment and connection, and trying to make a difference from a human perspective, not just a dollar perspective.
Thank you, Sandy. Terry and Peggy, do you remember your first giving decision as a couple, and how did you learn about giving growing up?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone, and thank you, Matt, for the invitation to join friends of ours on this panel. I would say, much like what the others have said, it was observation from my parents, and they were very generous, especially with their church and other causes that they believed in. So I grew up with that. I even recall sending part of my allowance to St. Anthony's Orphans Boys Home. And I have to this day a great devotion to St. Anthony. And if any of you lose anything, let me know. And I can say a prayer to St. Anthony and you'll find it. But when I married Terry, his family was even more philanthropic. And it was more or less through the osmosis of our upbringing, it just was part of our lives. It was never a question of whether we were going to be charitable. And we were giving very small dollars in those days. I was still cutting coupons out of the newspapers and we were watching our pennies, but it was just expected, we felt, to add charity and philanthropy into our daily revenue decisions. So I'll let Terry take it now. Thanks.
I was very fortunate to be raised in a family where the values and the culture were towards giving back your time, talent, and treasures. And it was a total commitment mentality from growing up as a young person, listening to my father and understanding that the expectation and minimum hurdle was tithing, and that you need to give at a certain level and volunteer time as you see fit. So that was, and then it was reinforced in business. So giving back, thinking of others was just a value culture within the family and within the business. And both Peggy and I took on board responsibilities and moved up rather quickly on a couple of boards that I can think of that were very early on in our civic development. One was Crittenton, which I was involved in. The other one was Marillac, which Peggy was involved in. And we had to make, at the time, large commitments for us. And then we were always raised in giving back, and United Way for many, many years was an opportunity to make a commitment through the company to impact other people's lives. So those are kind of the early impressions that I have going forward.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you all for sharing those great perspectives on your early giving learning and how you as couples have moved into that process. I'd like to ask now for each of you to describe your process for making philanthropic decisions with each other and within your family, and whether it has evolved over the years. Dr. Chow and John, I'll call on you first.
I'll go first this time. The way we usually would do it is there are three things that we traditionally have been interested in. And one is education. The second is the arts. And then healthcare is the third thing that we've really targeted our giving towards. And the reason why there's a common theme with all of those, and it's to bring along the less fortunate, to give back some of what we have accumulated to those who are less fortunate, and to be a voice for the voiceless. So usually towards the end of the year, we would sit down and decide which organizations were meaningful to us and impacted us, and that we also felt had the greatest impact in doing things for the community. So I won't say that there was a particular formula, but we would at some point during the year sit down and say, we'd like to make a contribution to this organization or that organization.
I have to add to that by saying that what motivates me, and I hope I've communicated this well to Valerie, is that I have to feel some type of spiritual connection to the organization. That is, that their goals and objectives, their guiding principles line up with mine. And so, of course, we do church. We belong to different churches and we support each other's church. We went to different schools and we support each other's schools. We both had experience in the practice of medicine and the board service in the in the medical arena, and of course the arts, the visual and the performing arts. All of these things line up with what I think we're about, and that's one of the ways in which we make our decisions.
Thank you, Valerie and John. Sandy and Christine, the same question. Share the process for how you make philanthropic decisions as a couple, and describe whether that's evolved over the years.
So yeah, well, I think probably we can do this with one speaker, so we can move on. But we're very aligned on the things we give to, and always have been from the very beginning. And very similar to what the judge said earlier, education, and for us, entrepreneurship, and helping those folks, especially those who come from environments that might not give them exposure to entrepreneurial leadership opportunities, to be able to get that exposure and to harness some of that inner drive that might have been unseen or unrealized were it not for programs like YEP or things that Christine's doing in KCGPA. The evolution, the only evolution for us has been that we have, as we've become a little bit more financially successful, setting up our own charitable trust for our family, not the big family of all the other Kempers, but just our particular group, the Walnut Hill Gang, where we live on our ranch. And that's the only evolution that's occurred, is putting that into philanthropy that could be guided by our children, perhaps, as time passes.
Thank you, Sandy. Terry and Peggy, talk about your philanthropic decision-making process and whether it has evolved over the years.
Peggy, you want to pick it up and I'll take it from there?
Yeah, it has evolved, and I'll let Terry talk about that. But I would have to say that we are not as specific with buckets. We are more engaged in organizations we're involved with. So we have a personal involvement with an organization, and we direct dollars therefore to that, assuming we believe in it, and we would believe in it if we're involved. But also a lot of times it's a relationship with the person who asks. So a lot of that goes to those friendships, those relationships. It might be something we've never thought of, but a person that we admire and respect can be persuasive. And so a lot of our decisions are based on that, but something that we believe in and are passionate about, that usually helps drive our decisions. And I'll let Terry talk about the evolution.
Yeah, I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, I've become very laser focused on an entity. I'm involved in a number, but really what drove me towards something called KC Common Good, which I founded and certainly had assistance from others. But we met with the religious leaders of the monotheistic faiths, from the Muslims, Jews, Catholics, Christians, the Black Christian church leaders. And we had a discussion, and discussion went along the line that all of these religions believed in the story of creation, that there was Adam was a very selfish, self-centered person, and there was an evolution that took place in each one of the religions that was transformational, moving towards a state which could be defined as agape love, or selfless, unconditional, non-judgmental love of others. And in this process of the going from the old Adam to the new Adam, the common denominator was there is a journey in life. And at some point in this transformation, we recognize the importance of empathy and action for those at the greatest risk. And it was very interesting dialogue. They wish they would have focused on what is known as the common good. Early in the 1980s, 1990s, when they were talking about what their differences were. But I've become much more laser focused in reacting to those at the greatest risk. And it has been really a unique process of growth for me personally. So virtually the major gifts that I am giving money to are really laser focused on those at the greatest risk in society. So I've become very motivated and evolved myself, especially over the last 4 to 7 years in this particular area. So it's been a unique personal growth in my own faith and my own beliefs.
Thank you, Terry and Peggy, along with the others, for sharing those great perspectives on how your giving processes work and how they have evolved over the years. Now I want to ask a question specifically for Valerie, Christine, and Peggy. Research shows that women tend to be hesitant about discussing money, including charitable gifts. Does that describe each of you or not? And talk about why. Valerie, I'll call on you first.
Short answer, no. I think, I have had people reach out to me and ask for donations, and I haven't been hesitant about talking about money, so I'm not sure what else to say. Usually I will consult with John. I won't just write. Depends on if they want to check right there. It may be limited to a certain amount, but if I'm still not hesitant to discuss money or what we're able to do.
Great. Christine.
Same answer. I've always been very comfortable talking about where we invest our philanthropy, as well as where we invest any of our assets, be they time or money. I did used to say, well, I'll give $100 to anybody who asks. That was kind of my easy threshold. If someone came, there's a level above that, after which I go to Sandy and say, what do you think? Should we do this together? I very, very rarely would make a significant commitment on behalf of both of us without talking to him first. But no, I don't find any discomfort. I think sometimes it can be a little uncomfortable asking for money. I've been on both sides of the equation, and I've much longer been on the side of asking for money for organizations rather than being asked. And I would say if there's any discomfort, it's sometimes there, but if you really believe in and are passionate about the cause for which you're asking, the conversation generally becomes easy as you go.
Great. Peggy.
Well, I would say I'm not uncomfortable at all about talking about organizations we support and those that we are involved with. However, I'm a little bit less comfortable talking about dollar amounts. So I don't like to, sometimes it's known because if there's a campaign and you're listed at a certain level, but I don't like to personally just discuss that. Just that we're supporters and leave the other out of it. And Terry and I, if it's a major ask, we always make the decision together. So it wouldn't be something I would be deciding without consulting him. And hopefully vice versa.
Thank you, Valerie, Christine, and Peggy. Those really helpful perspectives for all of us. I want to ask you now to share a memorable interaction with a fundraiser or nonprofit, either positive or a cautionary tale about how they handled your giving. How do you wish fundraisers and nonprofit leaders would approach you and your spouse or family? Should they view their gift interactions with you as events or as part of a journey? John and Valerie, I'll call on you first.
Perspective, we've had good experiences and bad experiences. And in talking about those experiences, unfortunately, the bad experiences probably predominate my thinking. Every gift is something that somebody sacrificed to make available. And every gift, regardless of its size, deserves to be honored, deserves to be recognized, and deserves thanks for that gift. One organization, I won't call the name. One organization, we had a very bad donor experience. We were approached about supporting a specific project. We supported that project, and the leadership of the organization apparently didn't know who we were or what our contribution had been. It was much smaller than some other contributions, I admit that, but not feeling as though our gift was appreciated. It was a long time before we supported that organization again. And so it's important, those of you who are organization leaders who deal in this whole thing of raising money, the better ones realize that every gift is a precious gift and deserves to be recognized and appreciated.
Thank you, John. Valerie?
I think John has said it all, and he speaks for both of us.
Great. Sandy and Christine?
I want a recording of that.
The whole session's being recorded.
I can't think of any bad stories or bad reactions. I mean, our position's probably a little bit, probably don't have as much time. So I would think the only thing that would really get us probably upset would be if we were really very involved, and maybe Christine can talk about KCGPA this way, but for some of the giving that we give as a couple and that we give as a family foundation, I don't know that we have ever had an oh my God bad experience. I mean, sometimes things don't work out the way they're supposed to work out, but generally we feel as the judge said, an obligation to give, and in giving, usually we feel pretty satisfied about how those gifts have been received. I really can't think of a bad experience. Christine, have you had a bad experience?
I can't think of a bad experience, but I would say that sometimes how the ask is positioned can be a little awkward. This is a small town and we're all really involved in the community. And I feel as though, there are lots of solicitations and lots of asks. And as Peggy mentioned, who does the asking matters in a huge way. Sandy and I may say that we're very strategic and given a couple buckets, but we give across the board depending upon the person doing the asking. But if it's a development person or it's someone affiliated with an organization and they call and say, hey, I want to go to lunch, or I want to, meet for coffee and talk about what you're doing with the school. And then it really turns out that they maybe want to talk about their organization and make an ask. I guess I would just say, I would be more straightforward about the reason for the call or the meeting and say, hey, I want to learn about your school, but I also want to talk to you about XYZ. So that's really all I can think of. No bad experiences, but back to the time issue for Sandy is don't waste someone's time by pretending a meeting is about one thing when it's really about another.
That's great, helpful insight. Thank you both for that. Terry and Peggy, memorable experiences, and should we view interactions with folks as events or part of a journey?
You want to kick it off, Peggy?
Well, I was trying to think of cautionary tales, and I'll let Terry talk about the other part of your question. And I would say not only passionate about an organization that we decide to give to, but very often it's also important that the leadership is strong. And typically we have a relationship with the CEO. We know who the board members are. And on occasion that has changed. I can think of one example, and I won't share the organization, but it's the leadership has changed and the culture and values of the organization have changed, causing us to pull back, which we were once very aligned with. So that is something probably that can happen with any change of leadership. And we're so old now, the longer we live, a lot of these organizations have changed leadership, sometimes multiple times. So I would say staying connected enough to really know what's going on, if you have an ongoing long-term giving history with them, is probably important.
I would say this, I believe always that when a professional is going to make a call on somebody, they need to figure out what is the win-win relationship. And I think the desired opportunity is to develop the win-win relationship into a journey of a relationship going forward with a donor. And I think too often there isn't a thought of what is the win-win relationship with the person that's being asked. And I would encourage professionals who are listening in to really develop a strategy before they do an ask, especially if they haven't done their homework on the person they're doing the ask of. So I think the best opportunity is to have a journey of a relationship going forward with an organization or with individuals who are professional fundraisers. So I think even a turn down is an opportunity to reflect and make a determination whether there is potential for a relationship going forward with this individual. And perhaps maybe you caught the person at the wrong time, you took the wrong approach. So I would say, yeah, there are events, but an event of a yes is the beginning of a journey, or it can be a one-shot opportunity. It really is how the asker is positioning that relationship going forward.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you all for that really helpful perspective on your experiences and interactions with professionals in the fundraising world. I want to remind all those in our Zoom meeting today that we are going to have a period later during this panel when we will ask your questions to the panelists. So feel free and please do put questions in the chat that you would like us to ask them. This is an opportunity for you to interact with them directly, and we encourage you to do so. I want to ask you now about your larger family and whether there's influence there in your giving thoughts and decisions. Do your parents, siblings, children, and or grandchildren influence your household giving decisions? If so, in what ways? I'll start with you, Valerie and John.
The short answer is no. The only way our parents have influenced us is that we were taught to tithe, and we still do. We grew up tithing, and so that was really the only way that they influenced us. That's short answer.
I have to confess, I didn't grow up tithing. It's something that I came to more as an adult. One of my searing memories was when it was Pledge Card Sunday, and I must have been 6 or 8 years old, and my mother got angry with me because I wanted to cut my pledge from 10 cents to 5 cents. And she insisted that I maintain or increase the 10 cents. So the principle of giving was very much impressed upon me. And as I came to a greater level of wisdom, we came to the point where, I came to the point where I recognized the imperative of tithing. And when we talk about tithing, we're talking about the church affiliations that we have. The arts, education, healthcare, all those gifts are over and above the basic tithe that we give.
Excellent. Sandy and Christine, do family members influence your giving decisions, and if so, in what ways?
Probably her family more so than mine. I do. We've given more to some of those causes up in Nebraska because of your parents, sweetheart. I'd say parents, at least on my side, probably not as much, other than the fact that they were involved in the family foundation. But we do have a really high desire to engage in and listen to our children's views. So really expect them to have opinions, to have organizations, to have thoughts. And they're 22, 20, 18, and 16. And the three olders all have, certainly the two olders have very strong opinions about how they want to be involved philanthropically and from time and dollar wise. We really want to listen and support what they think they want to do.
I agree. We have, to the extent that we've given in honor of my parents, my siblings, or causes that are important to our children, certainly organizations with which they're involved, where they go to school, sports teams that they're on, we have definitely been influenced that way. But yes, I mean, as early as I can remember, we've talked with our children about where we invest. And again, that's not just philanthropically, it's also, you know, they each have a little tiny brokerage account that they started when they were little, and we would match every dollar they'd put into it. We'd sit around the dinner table and say, They'd say, well, I want to invest in Disney. And we'd say, why? And talk about why Disney seemed like something that mattered to them. And it's the same thing with philanthropy. We will, read headlines in the paper and talk about what's happening in the world and how we might make a difference. And yeah, they're an opinionated little bunch. And we do expect that someday they will be managing our family foundation. So we are pretty pointed about involving them. Though at the end of the day, right now, we still get the final word.
Excellent. That's very, very exciting to hear. Terry and Peggy, how do parents, siblings, children, and or grandchildren influence your household giving? And describe maybe some specific ways if that's the case.
Well, we started a foundation, and I've been giving to it for a period of time. And we bring our kids in. Number one, we want them to be engaged in the community. We want them to give back, and we want them to have a say at the table. And we have a meeting with them. We give them an allotted amount of money to give away. And then they each have an opportunity to talk about what they want to give to. So I think the values and the culture we're trying to create with our children is extremely important. And then I would also say that we support a number of the activities that they are engaged in outside of this own foundation giving. So this whole reinforcement of values, culture, tithing, giving back time and talent is extremely important for us to instill in that in our children and hopefully our grandchildren. Peggy?
Well, and beyond our personal family foundation now, Terry has been on the board of the Dunn Family Foundation for most of his career life. And those decisions are greatly influenced by his brothers and his father and other family members. So I would say, the giving is all over the board, but it is often very influenced by those that are related to our family members.
Excellent. Thank you all for sharing that really helpful perspective on how your larger families are involved in your giving decisions. I want to step back to a point that one or two of you have made and ask a question of the entire panel about when you speak with your spouse regarding a gift decision. Research shows that individuals have varying thresholds of when that occurs. It's much higher for men. Research shows that if the gift is $901 or higher, a male feels that he needs to speak with his spouse than it is for women. That threshold is $311. How does this compare to how things work in your relationship and the point at which you feel you need to consult with your spouse about giving decisions? Valerie and John, I'll ask you to respond to that question first.
Valerie?
Well, I have been in situations where I've written a check on the spot for $250 or $500 without consulting John. But if it goes into the thousands, or 1,000, probably 1,000 would be my threshold, where if it's above that, I would consult him.
She's correct.
Great, thank you. Sandy and Christine.
Well, I don't know that we have a threshold. We always talk about how we want to get together. Whatever she wants to do, we do, and yes, whatever I want to do, we do as well. So it is kind of interesting from the perspective of Christine. Maybe you're comfortable or uncomfortable talking about it, but you have shared with me that sometimes, especially as it relates to KCGPA, you can have a room full of really extraordinary women leaders in the community. And then when they go back to have the conversation, or something doesn't happen relative to the continued conversation about giving, you can have that great momentum, and then they kind of go back to the family and things slow down. Do you feel like that's part of this problem, that the women don't feel as empowered or don't feel that they have voice relative to family giving? Why would you think that this would exist?
Well, I think that the reason the Women's Foundation was originally created was to encourage women to get engaged in philanthropy. And I don't remember who told me about this metaphor, but it was sort of that women think of dollars as being a fixed amount in a bucket, where men tend to view it as a river flowing past that they can dip into and out of. And I don't know how accurate that is or how much it reflects the days today, but I do think that women have been slower to come to philanthropy than men, but I think that many of them are really coming into their own today. Including me. Thank you very much. So yes, we we are usually aligned, but yeah, if it's more than a few $100, we still talk about it.
No, we don't. We do not talk about things that are above a couple. No, that's not true. I mean, I think maybe if it doesn't matter what the dollar amount is, but you just do whatever you want to do, and I'm there.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that should be the way you function in all things. But I guess what I'm saying is that unless I know it's something that we absolutely both agree, and if something completely new came up and someone wanted a $5,000 or $10,000 gift, I think I'd probably talk to you about it, babe.
Yeah, that's right. And then she goes and starts a school, and it's $1 million gift, and I got no advance notice whatsoever.
I warned you.
I love it.
Talk to me about the $500 checks, but not the $1 million checks. That's awesome. Well done.
All right, moving on.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for sharing. That's great insight for all of us. Terry and Peggy, is there a threshold above which you do talk or below which you don't? Would be interested in your experiences.
I'm going first on this one because I'm so much better at sharing information with Terry than he is with me. But I would say, much like Valerie, I think I feel very comfortable writing a check for $1,000 without discussing it. But I always tell him, I mean, I am very good at communicating and telling him, hey, I'm going to do this because. But when it gets to be major dollars, we do make that decision together. Often he's already made his decision and just lets me know about it. That's the big difference in the two of us. Terry, I'll let you defend yourself now.
Well, we have a judge here, so I'm guilty as accused. No, I think Peggy, the question is dollars and amount. I think Peggy is generous, I'll spit it out, but I think she also likes to dialogue much more than I do on the subject. And I always have to confess what I want to do and when I want to do it from any major gift size. But no, I think as Christine and was talking about how men and women approach, and I think that is an attitude of men that typically, I potentially could be very happy living in a much lower standard. And I think Peggy and I think most women really want to make sure there is money at the end of the day that they can continue their lifestyle the rest of their lives. And for me, it's not quite as important as it is for her. So Christine, I'm guilty also.
Great perspective from all of you. Thank you so much, and for revealing a bit of the fun dialogue that goes on in your families. I want to ask you each to reflect on one more question in this format of our panel, and then Karen Cox, Heartsook's president and co-founder, is going to bring some questions to you from our audience today, which I'm excited about. I want to ask you to reflect on one more question. What advice would you give other couples just starting their philanthropic journey? You've shared so much with us today about your philanthropic journey. I know others would be grateful to hear from you what advice you have for them. Valerie and John, I will start with you.
I'll start. Peggy touched upon it a bit. I think it's important for couples starting out to really do some research about the organizations. They need to make sure that they're spiritually aligned with the goals and objectives, principles of the organizations that they're thinking about supporting. Are they truly living out what they say their mission statement is? Do they truly believe in inclusion? What's the makeup of their board structure? Are there people who bring a variety of points of view and a variety of experiences? Does it fit with your own personal idea of how you want to make the community better? Those are the things that I would suggest.
Excellent. Valerie?
I'll just ditto John. I think he pretty much has expressed the way we feel. Because there are many, many organizations out there, but you do want to take a deeper dive to make sure that the organization is sustainable and is in line with your values. So, okay.
Great advice. Christine and Sandy, what advice would you have for couples just beginning their philanthropic journeys?
So I'll jump in just only because, and I think you could probably talk to the couple side better than I, but we just did something like this inside C2FO, where we asked the young, mostly much younger than I, younger men and women in the company, to pick organizations relative to a Juneteenth pledge that we were making to orgs who were supporting companies run by and serving people of color in KC. And the advice we gave there was to do the diligence on the financials, to make sure that if we were going to give this gift as a company, we were giving to A, to your point, sustainable, B, diverse, and to have that representation, B, as you described, as a judge described at the board level, also diverse. So how much is going to overhead? How much is going to executive director salaries? How much is going into the programmatics? All that was part of the consideration set. And that team of folks for our project equity group did research on 15 or 20 companies, picked the ones that met that criteria. So there can be a criteria, and there was. And I think that would be my advice to young couples, is to kind of dig in deep, as Valerie said, relative to what that org is doing and how they represent the community they're serving.
Excellent. Christine, your advice.
Yeah, I forgot I was going to answer too. I would say that when I was younger, I used to give a little bit of myself across a bunch of organizations, and probably our giving was more that way. I mean, we still give across a lot of organizations, but I've tried to focus my time and energy as I get older on the couple of things that matter most to me. And I would say it's true that my philanthropic dollars will follow. So when I decided I was going to found the school, I hopped off of a bunch of other commitments that I was in because I wanted to go deep. And I would say that for me, that's become more meaningful over time, to just try to really move the needle in a few places. Although, certainly we'll still give across the board from here to there, but they won't be the same level of giving as we will to the things that are really the most near and dear to our hearts.
That's great advice and great perspective to share, and really can inspire a lot of people to think about their own commitments. Peggy and Terry, what advice would you give to couples just beginning their philanthropic journeys?
Peggy, go ahead first.
Well, I would encourage couples, when invited, to say yes. As I look at my own life, it's been my willingness to give my time and talent to an organization and to become involved in that has led to, therefore, philanthropic gifts perhaps later. But all of those involvements have led to friendships with other volunteers, sometimes board members, especially if I've gone on the board. And it's enriched my life so much. I encourage young people all the time, as much as possible, to get involved in trying to better their community and find something you're passionate about. Don't do it with just every organization that comes along, but with those that you feel strongly about. And then later you can, as Christine said, you can zero in and focus more on things that you want to really focus on. But I just encourage you to say yes when the invitation comes.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what's been stated. I do want to double down on what Sandy said. And I do think, looking at the business, there's a new term called social entrepreneurship, which means there is a changing business model, focusing on vision and purpose, but it goes deeper. You have to look at your capital as a gift, as invested capital. There is a potential return on investment. And I think these businesses or entities that are charities need to be much more transparent and tell people what the metrics are. What are they measuring? What is success? What is return on my gift? I think all those are questions that a person who is starting out needs to look at, because I think today the bar is being raised on performance of charities and other nonprofit organizations. And that transparency and measurement needs to be very much open as a person is learning how to give away money.
Thank you, Peggy and Terry, and thank you all for those great perspectives and great advice for couples just beginning their philanthropic journeys. I now want to call on Heartsook President and co-founder Karen Cox. She has been receiving questions from you, our Zoom audience, that she will now share. And as she does that, I will then call on the entire group of 6 panelists, not one by one in this case, but just among the 6 of you, whoever would like to respond can feel free to do that. Karen?
Sure. So our first question is for Marvin Daniels, and he asks, do philanthropists like yourselves seek to support smaller nonprofits that aren't as well known, but do great work in your community? Do you seek them out, or do you actively try to support ones that aren't as well known?
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Marvin. I will ask all 6 of you. If any of you would like to respond to that question, feel free to do so.
I don't think we seek them out. There's so much that's inbound that it's hard for us to have time on the outbound side. So that might be, Marvin, to your point, it is harder to, because of the amount of time that we don't have, it is harder to do the diligence and be proactive, and we're probably more in a reactive mode. At least we are.
Thank you, Sandy. Others?
I would agree with Sandy. I don't think we seek them out, but one example of lots of smaller organizations is our gifts to United Way. And through United Way, they do the due diligence. They've got the manpower to do that. And we feel very confident that our dollars are going to be directed appropriately, and often they're supporting small organizations.
Personally, I'm looking for impact despite the size. So if it's impactful and it's gone through a screening process, I'm very receptive.
I agree. I don't think we have a bias against big and old versus new and young. Having started 2 charitable organizations ourselves, we can't have a bias against the new kids on the block, but we do have a bias for impact and efficacy.
I think it's important for small nonprofits to, in essence, run faster, jump higher, because there are so many worthy causes out there, and those that keep themselves in the forefront of people's minds are more likely to get support than ones, quite frankly, we don't think about because we haven't heard anything from them in the more recent times. That makes them no less worthy, but it does emphasize the need to develop relationships and market their principles and programs.
I would ditto what John said. And an example of that is that we did not support Operation Breakthrough until I was invited to take a tour by one of the board members. And when I took that tour, she was there. And I was so impressed that I came back and I told my husband, we have to support this. So I think if you can personally reach out to some potential donors, that is the best inroads you can make.
Thank you all for your responses to that great question from Marvin. Karen, another question.
Sure. I have another one from Lynette Johnson, and she asks, what impact do solicitations from nonprofits have on how much you give and when you give? Are there organizations you automatically give to year after year?
There's a preferred list, I guess we call it, that we have that we try and support year after year. Those that come in bulk mail usually get tossed, and there has to be some pre-existing connection, or at least some event, such as Valerie talked about, that calls to your mind the importance of a cause and inspires you to support it.
Other thoughts in response to Karen's question posed by one of the Zoom participants?
We have a list of who we have given to. We keep the list over multiple years because of tax requirements. And we look at those lists and we look at relationships and we look at impact and what is meaningful. And for a person or an entity to move up on that list as far as the amount of gift, it has to be impactful. There has to be a relationship there. And again, that gets back to this whole thought of a journey where you start with somebody. A good example would be High Aspirations, where we started with a rather modest gift back 7, 8 years ago, into now, we give approximately a nice 6-figure gift every year to High Aspirations. It's impactful, it's relationship oriented, and they do have measurement that really shows a return on investment.
Excellent.
I just want to add one thing that John said that I would stress. If it says dear friend, it usually gets tossed if they don't know who the solicitor is going to.
Right. Or if we get a letter that says, Dear Alex, we know this is not someone who knows us.
Or if they spell my name wrong.
Right.
That's right. Great response.
I'm getting stuff for Jonathan and Nancy Lee Kemper at our house. So check your database.
Oh boy. Yeah. Great responses. Karen, let's ask one more question and just have a couple of quick responses. And then I'm going to ask each of the panelists for any parting thoughts and perspectives they'd want to share. Karen?
Sure. Here's a question from Greg Carroll. He's asking if COVID has shifted your priorities for giving, or should nonprofit organizations continue to make a strong case for support for their ongoing operations, or should they focus on the impact of COVID?
I sit on a foundation board, and that's been a dialogue on what has been the financial impact of COVID on a number of organizations. What can we do and how should we address it? Where an organization has been financially successful, has gone through a major structural change and has the ability to come through it. And the question always has been, when we looked at it from this family foundation standpoint, what can we do and how can we assist? So yes, I think COVID has been a major impact in the thought process on how do we help an entity bridge a challenging position so that they continue their doing good in the community.
Thank you, Derek. Sandy?
Agreed. Same.
And I can also say, as someone who's in the business of trying to raise money for a capital campaign in Kansas City, a number of the large foundations have for the last 18 months really just focused on COVID giving and haven't looked at any other opportunities. They're starting to say by the end of the year they will. So I think there's been a big focus on COVID, and understandably so. At the same time, there are some organizations that need to have their operations and other critical functions dealt with beyond the COVID crisis. So I wouldn't say stop asking, but just recognize that it's been a pandemic. So organizations are responding.
And I would like to give a big round of applause to all those Kansas City community members who have supported organizations with special events that have gone virtual and haven't been held, and yet have raised more dollars than ever before for their virtual events. A lot of that's because they didn't have the expense of doing the event, but people have not stopped giving. They have been giving through this pandemic, and some even more generously. I've just been continually so impressed. So my hat is off to everyone.
One of the outcomes of what has taken place, though, Peggy, is the fact that we've enjoyed our time that's been freed up of not going to events, that we will be glad to pay money not to go in the future.
Thank you all. I know that we all wish we had more time to hear from you. I'd like, before we end this panel, to give each of you a chance to share final thoughts and perspectives that you would like to with the group. I'll call on you first, John and Valerie.
Well, Matt, I want to thank you for thinking outside the box and inviting us to participate. It's given me And I think it's given us an opportunity to refocus our thinking about what we can do to contribute to the betterment of the environment community in which we live. So thank you very much. I'm happy to see a number of familiar faces on the Brady Bunch screen here, and it's been a good opportunity to fellowship. Thank you.
Yeah, in closing, I would just say, while many people may not have generational wealth, you know, being able to give a $500,000 or $1 million gift, there are many more people that are able to give 5,000, 10,000. So don't forget about those people, because they can make a significant impact. And that's pretty much probably where we have been through the years. And we continue to give, and we love Kansas City. We love our community. And so we will continue to invest in those organizations that are impactful for our community.
Thank you, John and Valerie. Sandy and Christine, final thoughts and perspectives you'd like to share with our group.
You, sweetheart.
I want you to go. I guess I would say, just listening to the conversation and thinking about it over time, I got into philanthropic activity because I knew it was the right thing to do, and I knew it was important to do. When I landed on the causes that I was really passionate about, it became more valuable to my life to be doing it than any value that I think I provided. And I've heard people say that in speeches before, where you say, oh, I got so much more than I gave. And that has become true for me as I've evolved as a philanthropist and found my spot. And so I guess if there's just a parting thought, and people have said today, is just, you know, find where you're really passionate, find where you can really make a difference. And I think it's important to get involved with time as well as dollars to really fully engage with an organization and have a mutually beneficial result.
So I see that it looks like a lot of the folks on the Zoom are involved in running or parts of charitable organizations. One thing that probably benefits you, and of course Christine, because she's doing KCGPA or blessed me when we were doing Education Inc., is that phrase, you know, charity begins at home, or all charity is local. I would throw that back to you and say, nope. How do you consider yourself best practice relative to what you're doing against the world standard bearers in your particular field? How many of us feel that, you know, those of us who are involved in a charitable organization, that organization is the best in the world at what it does? And can you become better at articulating not just the why and the passion of your organization, but the how and the what and the when and the whether. And the whether is, when you think about the Gates Family Foundation, they said they wanted to help save lives. Did they then go to New York or to San Fran or to major cities where children were living in poverty? They wanted the biggest dollar return on their investment. Where did they go and what did they attack? They went to Africa. They focused on, in this particular case, malaria and mosquito-borne disease and a few other diseases that were affecting children very, very dramatically, and they put their money there. Are we at that level in our charitable organizations here in Kansas City, or do we rely on that mantra of all charity is local for us to be successful running those organizations? And I would challenge you to try to be world-class rather than local class.
Great advice, Sandy and Christine. Thank you so much. Peggy and Terry, your perspectives and parting thoughts for our group.
I agree with everything everyone has said. And I also want to applaud the Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership. I have had the privilege of being involved with you all as a senior fellow for a number of years, and really have appreciated the additional expertise and education that has been imparted to leadership groups that have come through the program, and what they have gained and taken back to their organizations. And then in addition, I've had the privilege of working with Heartsook on a number of capital campaigns over the years. So I'm a big believer in continuing that lifelong learning, gaining extra expertise, and then the collaboration of what it means to an organization to bring in someone like Heartsook, with your expertise to help with some of these major initiatives in fundraising. So just really appreciate being part of this and want to thank you.
Yeah, I would only add, I think there's been a lot of great comments from the panelists, but I would encourage people who are in the business of a not-for-profit or a charity, you're going through an evolving time where philanthropy is going to demand much more from you, from developing business plans, understanding your brand, understanding mission, vision, and also being able to measure your performance on how you're impacting other people's lives. So I think really honing your skill sets and the whole business of understanding that you are a business, that you have to develop strategies, evolve strategies, and make sure you're aligning to the changing giving environment would be a parting comment to anybody who is operating or running a not-for-profit entity at the moment.
Thank you, Terry and Peggy. Great perspective and advice. I have had a great time together. You have taken time from what I know are busy schedules to be with us, and for that we're grateful. Thank you for all you've shared and for the ways in which we know that will improve the nonprofit sector in the Kansas City region and across the country.